we're going to go through the notes for Unit 8 today. I apologize, this has to be on a video, but Henry is sick, so I have to stay home with him. So the first thing we'll talk about is population versus sample. Population data versus the sample data can be compared. Your population data is whenever you are using data from every individual of interest. So, for example, if you asked every single person on the football team their favorite color Gatorade, then you would be asking every person, so that would represent the entire football team. But perhaps you don't have time to ask every single person on the football team, so then you might want to use sample data. Sample data is used whenever you're gathering just some of the individuals. So, for example, if you only ask the offensive line a question like, what's your favorite color Gatorade? Then you apply that to the whole team. You run a risk of bias whenever you're using sample data. So what we're mostly going to be talking about today is how to design a fair experiment or a fair survey. This just asks us to identify whether we're talking about a population or sample data. So for A right here, the U.S. government takes a census of its citizens every 10 years to gather information. For this one, if the census works as it is supposed to, that should be population data, because the census is supposed to count every single person. Now, in reality, do they get every single person? Maybe not, but it's definitely trying to be a population data for that. You want to know what sports teams prefer, so you send out a survey to all the students in your high school. Assuming that this is voluntary response, that's going to be a sample because not everybody is going to respond to that survey. For C, it says you want data on the shoe size of all Elkins students. So you interview every student at school. So you've asked every person in the school and you're talking about the Elkins students. So that would be population data. You have asked every single person. We go to the next slide. I don't know why. Oh, oops. Let's go right here. Next slide. Okay, there we go. For D, you want to know how long people in Winston-Salem visited the beach last summer. So you polled 50 random people at the fair. So this would be a sample data. You are only picking 50 people, but you're applying that to all of Winston-Salem. For E, you want to know the average GPA of a student. So you ask all of the students in all of your classes. This is going to be a sample data. You are asking just the people in your classes. There are other people that are not in your classes that you would be applying your results to. So, whenever you are sampling, you have to be very careful for bias, because you can make studies say what you want them to say pretty easily if you do not make a fair study. So bias is systematic error that is introduced by the sampling method. So the way that you have set up how you are sampling is causing there to be error that does not actually represent the entire population. For an event to be fair, there is no predetermined pattern or bias towards any particular outcome. So let's move on. So when you're sampling a section of the population or giving a poll, there are good and bad ways to do it. So an unbiased sample is one in which a good section of the population is represented. But a biased sample is one in which the sample does not adequately represent the population. So this is when one group is maybe overly represented or totally excluded at all. In general, one rule that you can know about sampling is that the bigger the sample, the more accurate the results. So larger samples are going to more closely reflect the population. If you only ask 10 people a question versus asking 1,000 people, you're not going to get as good of a result with that smaller number. So let's look at some things that can cause our sampling methods to be biased. So there are several that are going to cause very biased results. A convenience sample is whenever you select any members of the population that are available to you. So, for example, if you're asked to interview 10 people about their job, you might pick a convenience sample. You might ask your mom and your dad and your grandma and your grandpa and all the people around you that you know that are just most convenient. This is not going to be the best sample because all of those people have something in common that might mean that they only represent a small part of the population. Maybe all of your family are all doctors. You've got, 7 doctors in your family. So whenever you interview this, you're going to overrepresent doctors and you maybe underrepresent another type of job for that. So convenience samples generally offer a pretty biased result. Another thing that's going to offer a biased result is a voluntary response sample. They actually use these a lot. Anytime you go to a store and there's a survey at the end of your receipt, or whenever you eat at a restaurant and they might have like a card that you can leave a response on to tell how your service was, you are only selecting members of the population who volunteer for the sample, and these are typically going to be the people that have very strong opinions. You usually don't fill out that survey unless you're mad about something, or maybe if you were really, really happy with it. But most people do not fill out those surveys just for a regular interaction with someone. So, while they might have some value, they are going to produce a biased response. A systematic sample is not as bad sometimes as the other two. This is whenever you might order the population and then select it at regular intervals. So for example, if I put everybody in the class in alphabetical order and then I picked every third person, it's not totally random, and depending on what you are asking about, then you might get a decent sample for this, but there could be a lot of ways that this could go wrong. For example, if you maybe put people in order based on their weight and then ask them a question about ask every third person about their eating habits, you might not get the best results in that case. Some less biased sampling methods that can be used. You can have a cluster sample. This is where all members of the population are broken into groups and all members from a group or groups are chosen. So if I put everybody in the class in group A, B, C, D, E, and then I chose one of the 5 groups, that would be okay. If my groups are random, it's a decent way to go about it. If I don't group you randomly, though, then I might get some biased results. A stratified sample is when all members are broken into groups and then some members of each group are chosen. So, for example, if I looked at club members, so I broke everybody up into the clubs that they were a member of, and then I picked 2 members from each club to survey. So I would be making sure that I represented each group, each club, but I was choosing those randomly. So this is a decent way to sample, but it can have its issues as well. In general, about the best way to sample in a lot of cases is a simple random sample. This is when all members of the population are equally likely to be chosen. So this would be like I put everybody's name in a hat, and I pull a name out. Or I do this a lot, or not a lot, but I do this sometimes in class whenever I put everybody's name on that wheel and I spin the wheel. You all have equal chances of being chosen from the wheel. So that is a simple random sample. And that is going to produce good results most of the time. So for each one of these, we're just supposed to determine if the situation would produce a biased or unbiased sample. For number 1, you want to determine how many people in a school are going to college. So you ask every 3rd person in an AP Calculus class. So if we did this, this would definitely produce a biased result because these kids are in AP Calculus, which is an advanced level math class. So they may be more likely to be going to college than if I go to a different class where students are maybe less motivated there. So so that would produce definitely a biased result. Number 2, you want to find out people's favorite kinds of food. So you ask 100 people at the food court at the mall. The problem with this is that you are already at the food court at the mall. So these people clearly at least eat at the food court at the mall sometimes. So they may have different opinions than if you were to ask a different group of people. So this would produce a biased result. That would be probably an example of a convenience sample. It is convenient to ask people at the mall versus trying to get some sort of random group of people. 3 is putting the names of all the seniors in a hat, then drawing names from the hat to select the sample of seniors. This would be unbiased. Okay, everybody would have an equal chance of having their name chosen. 4, determining the shopping preferences of the students at your school by asking people at the mall. Again, about anything that happens at the mall or at a specific place that nobody goes to, or not everybody goes to, would not be a good way to go about it. So this would be a biased sample here. This would exclude groups of people. Your Walmart shoppers would not be at the mall, possibly. You wouldn't be getting a good sample of everyone. Number 5, finding the average height of the students in your school by using the members of the football team. This would produce a biased result because you are only looking at the members of the football team. Not always, but in general, those who are playing football, particularly your linemen, are going to be some of the bigger kids in the school. So this would not be a good average. Another issue here is that most of the members of the football team are going to be male, and if you are just looking at students, male and female, that's not going to be a good average height. You're not pulling from male and female students, so that would be a problem there as well. So pretty much all of these are biased except for number 3, where you just have a random sample here. All right, we'll continue on. Another thing you have to be very careful about is asking biased questions. Whenever you have a biased question, people are led to answer in a certain way and will be more likely to answer in a certain way. There's several ways that this can happen. For example, you could combine two or more issues, and then people may not really be answering the question. They may be answering for the first part of the question instead of the second, or they may get confused. Using double negatives is a bad idea because it just generally makes it confusing. So you wouldn't say, would you not like to not have chicken nuggets for lunch. The not makes that very confusing. Overlapping answer choices are a bad idea. Several years ago, they did a calendar survey in Elkin, and in the calendar survey, they had questions like, would you like to have 2 weeks off at Christmas? And everybody said yes. And they said, would you like to start on, early August, mid-August, late August? Everybody wanted to start late August. And then they had another question, would you like to get out in May, late May, early June, mid-June? Everybody wanted to get out in early May. The problem is that those three things could not all happen in the same school calendar because we have to go a certain number of days. So the questions overlapped. You couldn't have all of those things happen at one time. So rather what they usually do now is they will just present like 2 possibilities for the calendars and ask for comment on those because there are certain laws for the calendar that we have to go by. You should avoid words that cause strong reaction or emotion. Anything that would lead somebody a certain way to answer the question. It's not a good idea to lead the subject to an answer, so you shouldn't really ever ask in a question, do you agree that, or do you not agree, because you are kind of leading them to answer the question. And the last tip here is not to refer to an authority. So like if you say, according to the FDA, blah, 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 then you are having that person go against the FDA if they don't answer the way that you want them to answer. So they will be less likely to answer in that manner. So let's look at each one of these and determine whether the question is biased or unbiased. How much of your time do you waste on Snapchat? The problem with this one right here is that word waste. That makes this a very negative thing. Nobody wants to admit that they waste time on Snapchat. So this would be biased. A better way to ask this question would be, how much time do you spend on Snapchat each week? Without any emotion behind it, just a simple numerical answer is what they would give. Number 2, how many miles do you drive each week? This is a perfectly good unbiased question because it's just a simple fact that you're reporting. Okay. 3, which brand of running shoe do you prefer? Again, this is a preference question, but that's what the person's probably wanting to measure. So this is perfectly okay. This is an unbiased question. It does not lead you to answer in any certain way. That it does not lead you to say Nike over Adidas over whatever other type of shoe that you might want to put there. For number 4, it says, would you agree with the NCAE that teachers should be paid more for earning their master's degree? This is a biased question. Okay, it is leading you to say yes because you are agreeing with the NCAE, which is an authority. So if you don't agree, then you have to go against the NCAE, which people will be less likely to do. That would be a biased question. Number 5, do you disagree with people who oppose the ban on smoking in public? The problem with this one is that it has disagree, which is negative, and oppose, which is negative again. It's a confusing question. You don't really know how to answer whether it should be a yes or a no, because if you disagree with the people who oppose the ban, then you really just are for the ban. Oh gosh, I've even confused myself. You disagree with those who oppose. So that would mean you are for the ban, I guess. So, so this is confusing. This is a biased question. What you should ask in that case is, do you support the ban on smoking in public? That would be the best way to ask that. 6, ask if you prefer Christmas or Halloween. You have 2 choices here. This is unbiased. Here, if you just want to measure which of those 2 is the favorite holiday of people. So that would be an unbiased question. For 7, it says, do you think that the food and beverages being served in the cafeteria tastes good? This is almost an okay question. The problem with this question is right here, food and beverages. You're asking 2 different things. This should be 2 different questions. So this would be a biased question. What you should do here is split that up into 2 questions. Do you think that the food tastes good? Do you think that the beverages taste good? Ask those 2 things separately, because somebody might really dislike the food, but be perfectly okay with the beverages that are available there. And the last one, do you prefer watching exciting movies or reading dull books? This is a really extreme example of a biased question because clearly you are trying to get this person to say exciting movies, because who wants to admit dull books is their favorite? So that would be another example of a biased question. So whenever you craft questions for any type of survey or poll, you have to be careful to make them very unbiased if you want good results. Okay, so that pretty much covers the things that we have to learn for the first part of Unit 8. I would like for you now to go to Canvas and do the 1.8 section of the quiz review. And then once you've had time to do that, you're going to come back and watch a second video on the margin of error.